Everyone, I'm Allie Buckman with the Potomac Bead Company, and I am going to make a necklace for you today that I'm going to call Slice of Heaven. It's made with these fun crescent segmented beads here that we're making, and they almost look like a little slice of an orange here all put together, hence the Slice of Heaven. I'm using a number of different colors of my crescents. If you haven't had or played with a crescent before, it's a checkmate design, and it is a 2-hole bead, exactly like it sounds, in a crescent shape. And I'm going to be making them in groups of 8 for these little beaded balls with some beads in between. At the end, we're going to string them on some leather, and I'll do some endings for you so we can make it actually into a necklace. I'll also show you some variety that you can do as far as the size and the count when you're working on your little beaded crescent beads here. For this project, you are going to need crescents, obviously, because we're working on those. And if you need any of the other materials, there's going to be a little drop down on the left-hand side here to link to all the products that you can purchase from me online if you need to. Or you can print out the list, go to your local Potomac Bead Company, and shop with them as well. These are the crescent beads, and like I said, I'm using a variety of colors I said kind of when they arrived in Anna's color tone here, with that nice spring tones. And then I was looking at them, and they actually reflect a lot some of the colors of spring as far as the fashion world goes. I'm using a lot of the coated here, those metallic-y look, as well as some of the softer and just the opaque colors of the crescents. In addition to the crescents, in between here, I have some 15-0 seed beads. You can do the project with 15-0s or 11-0s. It's just going to give it a little bit of a different look. The 15-0s that I am using are the Crystal Labrador, which is a nice bright silver color of 15-0 seed beads. The Silver Labrador is a check coating on the Miyuki seed bead, so that's where I'm getting that nice bright silver. I'm going to mimic that same bright silver in the ones that I'm using here inside my little crescent beads with some O beads in that same bright Labrador finish. And I'm going to use those as spacers, so that way there's some spacers in between my necklace when I'm creating the Slice of Heaven necklace. For the necklace portion, I am using my 1.5 millimeter leather, and I've chosen a dark brown color to go with these nice springy colors. I'm choosing this size, the 1.5, because that is going to fit the O beads. If you were choosing not to use O beads and you have a thicker piece of leather, this will fit up to a 2.5 millimeter piece of leather between all of the little crescent orange slice beads. To end the actual project, I am using some sterling silver hook and eye end crimps, and they're just going to hold my leather right in there, and I'll squash them down. If you're interested in them, they are item number 7307. Again, they're sterling silver. They come in a pack of 2 sets, so you get 2 complete sets of them in your package. The Crystal Lab that I'm using on the O beads, they are the Crystal Labrador Fool. So I'm using those. The Jet Lab and the Crystal Labrador Fool, they look identical. It's just a different base, but they have that nice bright Labrador coating, which is going to go perfectly because it matches my 15-0 seed bead. Some of the different colors that I have using here, I've used fig and poppy seed and red bronze Picasso. I have opaque rose quartz. I have that springy green of that green grass, the milky pink. So I'm getting a lot of those nice Pantone spring colors in here. To get started and to string it all together for all of these pieces, I am using 0.006 wildfire beading thread. It doesn't matter if you use 0.008 or 0.006, either would work. 0.8 is actually going to give you a little bit of a stiffer ball, so it's kind of up to you. I can move these around just a tiny little bit as I'm working with them, so it depends on what actual feeling you're trying to get. I do have a size 10 needle that I'm working with. And when you're cutting your cord and getting ready, you want to start with a long piece of cord. I sat down and made a bunch of these, and then I'll make 2 of them with you so you can see exactly how they're made. But they're kind of addicting. You can just sit there and play around, work with the different colors, and get creative with them. In addition to my thread and my needles and all the beads that are working on, I'm working here on a bead mat, which is actually part of my bead on it board. You can work on a regular bead mat, but that's nice to keep your beads from rolling. I also have a thread Zap 2 that I'm working with, and that's going to have a nice thread burner end to burn down the little ends of your thread as you tie off your little orange segmented crescent beads. If you are a glue person, super new glue is the one that I prefer whenever I'm gluing thread ends. So I am going to be using that at the end of each of my little ball beads here. Again, they look kind of like an orange segment, and they are in groups of 8. So the first thing I'm going to do is pick which color I want to do next. And I have this really pretty green color that I'm going to do for you guys to go into this color mix. And I have another tone here of that nice little kind of milky blue color that I'm going to mix in as well. To start out, we are going to get 8 of our beads out onto our bead mounts. I'm going to just kind of push my beads back a little bit here and get ready to make those. When you look at the crescents, sometimes it's hard to figure out exactly which way you want to pick them up because they are curved. The easiest thing to do if you're making these little crescent orange beads is to line them up exactly the way that you want to string them. We want them all lining up the exact same way, and this is also a good opportunity to make sure that both holes are completely open. Once you have your 8 beads laying on your bead mat, go ahead and put any extras away that may have come out. If you do want to do the ball a little bit smaller or a little bit bigger, you can do that. I have some examples here that I did while I was playing around to see the exact size that I liked. Here's one that I did with just 6 beads, so you can see it's much more closed at the end, and it has much more depth to it because the beads are spread out a little bit further apart. So that's one with 6. And then here's one with 11 O's in between. So you can see the size difference here as you're working with them. They stick more out further in between. So you can really kind of change up the design. And then I settled on this one here with 8. That's the one that I liked the best as I was working with it. So it went through a couple of phases of changes. And you can see they look good together. So you really can change up what you're using and get creative. Once you have 8 beads out on your mat, and again, originally I just cut about 5 or 6 feet of my beading thread, threaded my needle, and got ready to keep making these. I cut them off my needle and thread portion, and then I keep going with the remaining thread. I'm going to dump out here some of my 15 O's, and I'm going to get ready to start here. If you want, you can have a stop bead that you put on the end of your thread. I'm just going to hold the bottom of my thread. To hold the bottom of my thread, literally my left hand is just pinching the end of the thread. Because my crescents in their group of 8 are already lined up, all I'm going to do is pick up the crescents on the right hand side going down, or I'm sorry, the left hand side here going down right along the line. I'm going to pick up one 15-0 and then my 1 crescent. Again, I'm going in and picking up that left hand side of that hole. That'll be the crescent shape facing up. Add another 15 because I'm going to do a 15 between each one of my crescents. Add the crescent and add your next 15. This becomes repetitive. The crescents are not very fun to pick up and easy on the bead mat. So some of them I've even had to physically pick up and put on my thread. And kind of an oddball shape there. But they really do make a great design. This is pretty much the simplest use that you can do with them. The crescents we do sell in tubes, and they are approximately 9-gram tubes. A lot of projects don't call for that many, so that's kind of how this project came, was that I have a bunch of open tubes or bags, and that's how the color mix occurred. Once you have all 8 beads on, you'll see they're all facing the same way. Initially, when I put on the first of my crescents, I started with my 15-0, so I don't need to end with a 15-0. I'm going to pick back up my thread end, and I'm going to let all those crescents drop back towards the thread end. I only need enough thread here to tie on a knot at the very end. So what I'm going to do is just have about 1.5 inches of thread, and I'm going to do an overhand knot to tie those 2 ends together. That'll bring it together into that little orange shaped sliced bead. You can see on this one here, the green that I'm doing, that one bead wants to stick the other way. Try to push it down. If you get a better and tighter knot here at the beginning, it'll give you a tighter bead. So you want to try to make sure that they're all cooperating and sitting the correct way, and then tie another knot. So I'm just doing 2 knots, my first initial one there and this second knot. When you tie that second knot, you want to make sure that it fits exactly in between that first knot position and that you're not catching on any of your crescents. From there, we're going to go from that hole that we just caught to the second hole of the crescents and form our little ball. To progress, I have my knot right next between the 15 and the crescent. While I'm at that position, I'm going to take my thread and needle, coming across the crescent right next to the knot, and back through the crescent in the opposite direction. It's going to leave a little bit of thread exposed on the side of the crescent. For this one, you're really not going to see it because it's green thread going on the green crescent, but it's just going to sit right there next to the original knot. You can see it a little bit more here on the pink. You can see that thread go across the crescent. Because this design is very simple, all we now need to do is pick up a 15 and sew through the second hole of the crescent that's here at the top that no thread was going through. So we're going to add our 8 seed beads in between, our 8 crescents, and just sew right along the whole crescent. The nice thing about this pattern is that you do get done very quickly, all these little beads. You can make such a variety of them, different sizes, different colors, but it's kind of cool design to just show off the unique shape of the crescent bead, because I think it's one of the most unique of the 2-holed beads that has come out recently. As I go around, I'll come kind of back to the area where I started, so I have one more 15-0 to add, and I'm going to sew back through an additional 2 crescents. I'm going to come out after a crescent, before a 15-0, and I'm still in that same top row that I was working on. To get my thread and needle back to this knot, I'm going to go back through that same crescent that my thread is coming out of. Again, I'm 2 crescents away from my starting knot. I'm going to go down to the other hole of the crescents and reverse my needle and stitch to go back the opposite way. I'm going then back the whole way till I get to that knot end. Once I'm back to the knot end and the 2 threads are coming out of the same place, all I'm going to do is simply tie a knot. I tie it once to tighten that up and tie again. After I have the knot tied, if you want to, you can go in and grab your super glue glue. Just do a little dab of glue right on that knot. Let that dry just a tiny bit. Take your thread burner and burn down those thread ends. I burn them down, and then I'm going to burn them flush against the bead. Once I have them there, any of the thread ends that are sticking up, just kind of turn to the side. Make sure you're not burning through your actual piece. A lot of the smoke that you'll see on your thread burner is just that glue. Put that in your pile and continue with the next one. When you continue with the next one, you'll pick up your thread and needle that you just burned off from that previous little orange segmented bead, because you have additional thread on. So I can now go in again and get my 8 beads in a line, making sure that they're all facing the same direction here, and get ready to pick them up with 15s in between each. To start again, I'm just going to hold right there at the bottom of the thread, pick up a 15, and catch the left-hand hole of all of these crescents that are facing the same direction. If you want to design-wise, you could alternate what size beads you're making and make small and big. Just remember that the whole size of the center of the crescent is going to depend on the number of beads that you do have and the number of crescents that you use. So if you use more crescents, you're going to have a larger hole in the middle of this little crescent ball. Once I have my 8 crescents on, simply take it back till I have about 2 inches of thread left. Try to get those crescents to all line up facing the same direction. Tie that knot, pulling those beads all down, just kind of pushing those little crescents in place. Tie another knot to hold it in its position. And I'm going to take my needle and thread. When I'm beside that crescent and the knot is right there, I'm going to sneak over to the other hole of the crescent, coming back and sewing the opposite direction. And now we're just going to add our 15 O's, just like I did previously. Add a 15 and sew across the crescents. If you happen to get your tail caught, you can just kind of go in and fish that out of there. I'm going to continue adding the rest of my 15 O's, and then I'll show you again how we come back and knot off the end of the bead. Once the last 15 O gets sewed in, I'm sewing through that first crescent that my thread was coming out of in order to add that last 15. I'm then going to sew through the 15, a crescent, a 15, and a crescent. Give a nice tight pull. Sew back that same crescent and then all the way back till you get to that portion where the knot is. When I get those threads lined up right after the crescent between the 15, I simply take the thread ends and tie them in a knot together. This would also look great as just a little hanging, dangling earring on a hoop too. So there's another idea for you. You could put these on an interchangeable necklace that you'd be able to take them on and off, so that's an idea to put them on a chain. After I have that square knot done, take a little bit of super glue, glue my knot, let that dry a tiny bit, and then burn off the ends. Once I have all my little beaded balls done, you can actually make your design of your necklace and get started with stringing them onto the leather. So I've ended with about 16 beads that I am going to put in an order. You could do them all the same color, that's kind of up to you. I have here an order that I did pretty much randomly, or designed randomness, just making sure that there's not 2 of the same bright color next to one another. Some I did multiple beads of, some I just did 1 bead of because they're brighter or because they're different. So you can really play around with the design when you're working on it. To start the actual necklace design, I'm going to make mine about 16 to 18 inches, probably about 17 inches actually is what my final length will be. And I have my cording sitting here. When you have the cording, it comes in a 10-foot or 3-yard piece. And if you are purchasing it from us, and I'm just going to keep that kind of balled up end. That's going to work almost as my bead stopper. In between each bead, I was playing around earlier and decided I like the look of 2 O beads. You could do 1, you could do 2, you can knot in between. Again, this is just a suggested design. I am going to start my design though by adding 3 O beads for the very end. Once I have those 3 O beads, and you can see they move freely around the leather. I do want to see a little bit of leather. I don't want to cover the leather completely. I'm going to pick up my bead that's to the left and string it on through the leather. In between each bead now, I'm going to add 2 of my O beads and then string my next little orange segmented crescent bead. I'm going to continue that for that whole design, adding 2 of my little O beads, which work out great as spacers. So if you haven't picked up some O beads, they look really nice in seed bead and bead weaving design, but they also look great just in basic stringing. So I'm going to use 2 of them, continuing on, and just string 2 of them in between each of my beads as I continue to make my necklace. So I have all of my beads on here, and you can see the effect and the look that it's taking with my little O beads in the middle of my beads. Again, if you want to, you could kind of knot them and separate them out a little bit. If you wanted to see leather in between, I'm letting them all hang out and kind of fall to the middle there. Some of my crescents, if they're not pulled tight, they might eat the O beads a little bit. I'm not too worried about that. If you do want, you could put 6 seed beads, which are going to be a little bit bigger, in between, or some silver rounds. I'm going to push everything down a little bit along my thread here. You can see it just kind of slides right down. And that's going to give me an opportunity to start my end. I do want the beads to be free floating on the leather because I do like the leather look. It really reminds me of being summery and kind of getting the sandals out. I'm going to take my leather cording here, and you can see how it fits into the end of these little sterling silver hook and eye crimp ends. What I am going to do is I sometimes will fold over, just to give you an idea, I'll sometimes fold over my leather and push in that leather into the crimp end. It gives it a tighter fit depending on your size of your leather. The other thing that you can do is glue the end of your leather. These ends are made so that you don't have to glue, that you just put in and then that you crimp down, taking your needle nose pliers, or in this case, your round nose pliers, and crimp the end of that leather. Even though that does hold it and it does secure it, I still prefer to do a little glue on the end of my crimps here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get some E6 or some super new glue. You could use E6000 too. If I had E6000 sitting handy, that's probably the better one to use actually. But I'm just going to use some super new glue, glue the end there, and put my leather end on. You can see I'm letting it exposed a little bit at the top. That doesn't matter. I can go in and trim it. Once it's in there and the glue's still wet, I'm going to go in and squeeze down on the middle portion of that little end cap. You can see it flattens it out, and it actually is going to hold your leather in place. Once I go in one direction and really kind of squish that down, I'm going to go in from the other side and do the same thing, making sure that there's enough tension on it. I'll let that end dry and go over to the other end then and do the same thing. At this point, I need to know how long I want my necklace to be. So you can get your ruler out. I'm just going to eyeball it and get that design. I do want it summery, so I don't want it too long. You can either take scissors or just cutters, cut that down. And we're going to repeat that same process, adding some glue there at the end, getting my other side of my end. So one end has a hook on it, the other one has a loop. That's how it's going to stay closed. You could also just tie a button on if you wanted. And I'm going to try to flatten this so that when I'm looking at it, the end is flattened in the same direction of the loop. So I'm going to flatten it flat down straight against the loop. Flatten that out on one side. You can see I'm glue my fingers to it and flatten it out on the other side. If you need to and the leather is sticking out the top, which I actually prefer a little bit as I'm working with it, I'm just going to go in then after it dries and trim that down with my wire cutters so that way I can't see it. My ends then I'll let them dry a little bit. Another technique, because the whole thing does squeeze closed, is instead of just that end little portion, you can take a nylon jaws and flatten out the whole entire piece. That's kind of up to you. It's designed so that the flat is just in the middle. Either way it works. It's just kind of a preference of what it looks like. You could also use fold over crimp ends, which look more like a U channel, and then you fold over one side and the other side over top of that. If you're working with the thin leather, that works as well. Once that's dry and you have it complete, to put the end together, all you do is slide that loop into the hook. And you have your fun little slice of heaven necklace. So it has that great summery look with the different colors. You could also do it, like I said, on a chain and really change up the design. Use a smaller amount of beads, use a bigger amount of beads, use 11-ohs in between. So you can really change up the design of what it looks like. But I was really pleased with the size that the quantity of 8 made here when I'm looking at those 8 of my crescent beads. So again, play with the design, play with the color, really add up kind of just your different collection of crescent beads, get a couple different colors, make some other crescent products. You can always search on the channel for things that we've done with crescents and the little magnifying glass. If you do want to stay connected with us more too, you can join us on Facebook in our beading and jewelry making group and share your different inspiration there and ask questions and interact with us. You can also subscribe to this YouTube channel to get cool instructional designs or videos like this one, also new product updates, product reviews, and just general what's going on around the beading world and with us at Potomac Bead Company. If you do need to purchase any of these products, you can do so at PotomacBeads.com. If you need the links to them, you can go back to the beginning of the video to that drop down on the left-hand side, or you can check out the links underneath the video here. There's a little description that has what's used in the video and the techniques that you're learning. There's a little show more button underneath there, and that always provides links to the beads that were used in the video as well. If you get a chance, get a hold of some of these fun new Checkmate crescents and create this little slice of heaven bead with these almost orange segmented little crescent beaded beads. Thanks a lot for watching, everybody, and have fun with your little slice of heaven.